As we know, several schools in our area are serving as shelters, emergency shelters for people who had to evacuate their homes.
And there are a lot of them, really. A lot of mandatory evacuations have been ordered from the coastline areas all around our area. Franklin County, the entire county was ordered to evacuate. Let's go to Lenitra Bennett right now. She is at Godby High School and joins us by phone. So, Lenitra, what can you tell us? What's the scene? Set it for us there at Godby High's area there today for the evacuees.
Well, it's kind of an interesting situation going on right now, Art, because the lights went out in the gymnasium. But no fear for many of the people. They're just going with the flow. I was standing inside speaking with someone as soon as it happened, and all of a sudden the lights just went out. But people, they feel okay. The lights are on in the lobby area, so people are able to still walk around and of course, go outside as well. A lot of people have been going outside to get some air. Right now, officials are saying that they just believe that the lights got too hot or were on for too long. They're just giving them a cool down period, and things should be back up and running soon, probably in a few minutes. So everything's going well. As of noon, there were 278 people checked in here at the Godby shelter. So a lot of people coming in, taking advantage of it. The folks I've spoken to, they're just excited and glad that it's available. They came here because they didn't want to take any chances, and they would rather ride it out here, of course, than take chances being unsafe at their homes. And also here at Godby, you can bring pets. They have a separate area, so this is a pet-friendly shelter here at Godby. But everything seems under control. Everyone's doing well. They're in good spirits. So, and they're just waiting to see what happens.
And Lenitra, you said more than 200 people there now. I'm sure you've got a chance to speak to some of them. Would you say that a lot of them are from this area, or are they evacuees from other areas?
Yeah, the people that I have spoken to, only a few, but the ones I've spoken to, they are local. A couple live here in Tallahassee, maybe in mobile homes, and so they do that. They shouldn't stay in their homes. Another, I spoke to a few people from Apalachicola, and they, of course, with the evacuation in Franklin County, they made sure to get out of Dodge. And I'm told that the water is real bad in the St. George area, and that's, of course, just according to that family. So it seems like there are a lot of people who are from our area. But out of that 278, I'm sure that there could be some people traveling through, but I just haven't had a chance to talk to them yet. But just a lot of local folks who say that, they would rather be in a shelter than to stay in their homes.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Lenitra Bennett, reporting from Godby High School there, where hundreds of people are hunkered down right now, including some of their pets, apparently. Huh?
And as we know, as the storm nears landfall, we have seen more rain. We've heard some of that rain actually beating down on the roof here in Tallahassee. So let's go right out to our Alicia Turner, who is at Cascades Park right now. So, Alicia, what are the conditions out there?
Well, Venice and Art, I'll start with the drive over. There was a lot of debris in the road. There were pockets where there was heavy rain, and then as we got closer to this downtown area, not as much rain. Now, not a lot of people on the road. You could tell that there were some spots where power was out. There were some lights that weren't on at all, or they were flashing. Now, once we got here to Cascades Park, the rain has been fairly light. There's been a few gusts of wind, and in fact, we've actually seen one or two people actually inside Cascades Park. And if you can just take a look behind me, the rain is pretty light right now. The wind also light, not the conditions that you want to be out in, though. We're, of course, reminding everyone to stay indoors so we can bring you the very latest of what's happening on the ground here in Tallahassee. So the conditions not as bad as they were just an hour ago. So a lot has changed over the last few minutes. But just right now at Cascades Park, pretty breezy, and it is slightly raining here. But you can certainly tell that the conditions have the potential to pick up here in Cascades Park. I'm going to send it back to you guys in the studio.
All right, Alicia, really quickly before we go, the mayor has been telling people, stay off the streets if you don't need to be on those streets, that's for sure. Does it look like people are pretty much obeying that? Are you seeing just mainly emergency personnel on the streets, or are you seeing others?
Well, Art, surprisingly, we did pass a few cars on the way over here. It might be people who think that the storm isn't really going to get much worse than this, but hopefully they know that that's not the case. So we did pass a few cars. We did pass a few emergency vehicles, more cars than I might expect for this type of storm that we're in right now. So hopefully people are watching and taking heed to try to stay off the roads if they can, because even outside of the rain and the wind, there was a lot of debris on some of these roads as far as trees. We actually felt a limb hit the car. So a lot happening even throughout Tallahassee right now, from coming on the northeast part of town all the way over into Cascades Park. So there were some roads that were covered with limbs, covered with debris. You could tell where some of the power is out in some certain areas. And of course, you want to treat those like four-way stops. But again, as you mentioned, Art, if you are at home, please try not to get on the road for any reason. There's not, I don't think I saw any businesses open right now as far as on our way over. So definitely want to make sure people try to stay off the roads.
Very good. Well, thank you so much, Alicia. We appreciate that live report there from Cascades Park. So stay safe out there.
And the fact that we're already seeing all of these power outages, as she said, down trees, the storm hasn't even made landfall yet. So it just makes you wonder just how bad this has the potential of being in our area. Of course, all eyes are on Hurricane Michael as it nears the Florida Panhandle right now. The storm's still gaining strength.
Nicole Killian has more from Panama City Beach.
The rain and wind are picking up in intensity as forecasters warn the storm could bring potentially catastrophic and life-threatening conditions. Giant waves are thrashing Florida's Panama City Beach as Michael takes aim at the Panhandle. The storm strengthened overnight.
Unfortunately, Hurricane Michael is a hurricane of the worst kind. Major hurricanes cause large losses of life.
Forecasters are most worried about a probable 13-foot storm surge.
When that storm surge comes in, you have no control of it. There's so much pressure and it pushes everything in and then it sucks everything out.
Michael is also expected to dump more than a foot of rain and lash the area with 145-mile-per-hour sustained winds. Given the strength of the storm, nearly 400,000 people were urged to evacuate along the Gulf Coast, but officials warn time has now run out.
You've waited too long. You've got to hunker down. You've got to get shelter as quickly as you can.
For the most part, people have heeded warnings, but some are staying put.
Never been through a hurricane before, heard lots about it, watched them on television. We'd stay and see it out.
Florida has deployed at least 3,000 National Guard troops. Search and rescue teams from states as far away as Indiana and Pennsylvania are also ready to help once the storm passes.
It's humanity. It's going out and helping folks who are in need.
Michael is shaping up to be the most powerful hurricane to ever hit the Florida Panhandle. Forecasters say they've never seen anything like it. As the storm moves through, the governor warns that first responders may not be able to save those who are stranded. He says he is scared to death, especially for those on Barrier Island who refuse to evacuate. In Panama City Beach, Nicole Killian, now back to you.
All right, Rob, tracking the storm minute by minute. So, Rob, what's the latest on the storm as we near landfall?
Yeah, landfall's happening right now. If it hasn't been called officially, it ought to be. We'll get to that in a second. I want to direct your attention to the internal pressure, 919 millibars. That may not seem like an important number. That makes this storm, at least by internal pressure, stronger than Andrew was, which is mind-blowing in its own. 919 is an incredibly low number. The winds are still at 150 miles per hour, but remember, those winds associated with the center of the storm are in that small group right around the center, and they're likely elevated from the surface of the earth. It is almost up against Panama City Beach, or Panama City near the East Bay. It's saying right here its location is 15 miles west-southwest of Mexico Beach. As we get a couple of close-up views, we're going to notice that it's up over land already, and it's going to continue to push its way north, maybe up against that little spot where Georgia, Florida, and Alabama all kind of intersect, and then continue racing off to the north. let's talk for a second about what impacts we expect to see. I know we've broken this map down a few times already in the last hour. We're going to keep doing it to remind you that just because we hear about those 150-mile-per-hour sustained winds, that doesn't mean those are the impacts we expect to feel really in most areas, but certainly across much of our viewing area. If we start with the winds, I'm still expecting most of our winds in that 40 to 60 mile per hour range, maybe some spots a little bit closer to the core of the storm, maybe 65 or near 70 with some gusts, maybe up over hurricane strength. And we'll get to those winds and why in just a few minutes. The rain, by the way, I still expect most areas in that 4 to 8 inches, which is a lot of rain, but we've gotten a whole lot more than that without hurricanes. And eastern areas further away from the center, we're expecting maybe just a couple inches worth of rain. There is still at least the potential for tornadoes. I haven't seen any rotation in any of the cells yet, which is a good thing, but we'll continue to watch for that. It's the storm surge that I'm most concerned about for most areas. 8 to 12 feet above normal high tide is a lot, and that is not just for areas close to the core. That is for all around the Big Bend. As we get past 3 p.m., that's when the next round of high tides begins, so that's when we start to really look for that surge. And I don't know how far inland that's going to push the water. I know it's going to be a long way across a lot of those roads, and that is going to cause problems for days. Here's what it looks like for the last several hours as the storm gets closer and closer to the coast just south of Panama City there. Let's take a look here close in, and we see maybe St. Andrews Sound right over there. There's the East Bay near Panama City, and you can see most of that core already over land. Not sure they're going to consider that land because it is still the bay over there, but you can see between Port St. Joe near Mexico Beach up to Panama City, that's where it's going to be making landfall. As it moves inland from there, it should weaken considerably, and it's this area right in here. It's a very small area where those strongest winds are going to be. Then as you start moving 50 miles out from the center of that storm, so not even as far maybe as the Liberty County line, now we start talking about those hurricane force winds not even reaching that far. So it doesn't take a long distance for the winds to drop off exponentially. And that is going to be the reason why much of our area does not experience those kind of winds. Here's another really neat way to look at it. I've got the tropical satellite zoomed in and enhanced for you, so you can certainly see over there near East Bay. That's where the eye is making landfall now, just north of Mexico Beach. And I remind you that it's going to be the areas east of the center that are going to experience the strongest winds and the heaviest rains. So when we compare what the winds are like in Panama City versus Apalachicola, we're going to see stronger winds in Apalachicola than the ones in Panama City real close to the center of that storm. We'll widen it back out so we can see that entire system moving inland. And remember, we've got to get past all of this before things start to calm down. So there'll be several more hours of wind and rain still to contend with. But the more it gets inland, the more it gets a little bit more raggedy, and the more it starts to weaken. And as that happens, those winds calm down, the rains will start to calm down too, removing the core of the storm from that fuel, that warm Gulf water. That is so important to weaken the system, as would be bringing in a little bit of this drier air that's been trying all morning to punch its way in, especially to the bottom, but it hasn't quite done so. You got information?
FSU Panama City campus, gust to 116.
All right, thanks. Captain McCall just told me at the FSU Panama City campus, they have a wind gust up to 116 miles per hour. That's a wind gust. That's a 2 or 3 second burst. But that's incredible, and that's part of what we're watching with this system and the potential that it does have for areas well to our west. I can't stress that enough. We're going to hear these numbers. We're going to have that image in our mind of what a strong storm like this does, and we're going to expect it where we are, and it's not going to happen. Now, as far as that dry air goes, we'd like to see a little bit more of that get pulled into the storm and help to speed up the weakening of it. Let's take a look at some of those winds. And yeah, we talked about that wind gust at the FSU Panama City campus, but look at the sustained winds at Pensacola, just 22 miles per hour. Look at Apalachicola, 58 miles per hour. So that's a significant difference, east side versus west side of the storm. And if we take a look back a little further up to Dothan, which is in line for where that core of the storm can go, winds are only at 20 miles per hour right now. Tallahassee at the airport, only 21 miles per hour. So much, much weaker compared to what we're seeing with those gusts and what we're seeing with those sustained winds right near the core. Do see a wind gust at Apalachicola at 84 miles per hour. At Valdosta, a gust of 30 miles per hour. But that's it. So different, and it's not that far away, but it doesn't have to be. Now, the futurecast winds for most of our area are going to be in that 20 to 50 mile per hour range. The reason why the winds are going to be so much weaker than we're hearing and seeing with the core of that storm is because once you get removed from that core, and that core is really, really small, then you start to see those winds weaken exponentially. The hurricane force winds only extend out about 40, 45 miles. That's it. Get past 50 miles and you're not into hurricane force winds anymore. The tropical storm force winds, they only extend out about 145 to 170 miles. So get past 170 miles from the center of the storm, you're not even looking at winds up over 39 miles per hour. So that is the difference, and that needs to be reiterated and reiterated. We're not going to experience winds like that. However, 30, 40, 50 mile per hour sustained winds, a minute or two of that kind of wind, that's enough to cause power outages, knock power lines down. That's enough to make something in your yard turn into flying debris. That's enough to snap twigs, snap even medium to larger sized trees, especially if they're not the healthiest trees. So damage can occur to structures, to nature, to things outside, even with winds that aren't 100 miles per hour. And there's that delineation. We still expect damage, we still expect issues, we still expect problems. Even with these winds, it's so much better that the storm for our area didn't come ashore east of Apalachicola, where we would have been closer to that core, where we could have had those more devastating impacts from the storm. We do not expect those. Now, as we get to the overnight period tonight and early tomorrow, what's going to happen for a lot of us? The winds are going to come down a lot more for sure, but they're going to turn to the northwest and north. And what that means for us is we finally get to change up this air mass, something we haven't been able to do in weeks. And that likely means a really nice weekend forecast coming for us, but we're going to need a couple of days before we get there. Now, as far as the storm goes and the rains that we're dealing with, a lot of us are going to pick up 3, 4, 5, 6 inches worth of rain. That's a lot of rain, by the way, in a one-day period. So we are certainly going to get a lot of rain out there, and that can cause some stream and some river flooding on top of maybe some flash flooding in some of these bands, especially near the middle, that are going to contain maybe a rainfall rate of 2 or 3 inches per hour. So we still have a lot of rain to put up with. Some of those initial outer bands, they weren't all that heavy, but they're more moderate, like the ones we have in Moultrie now. These are the same bands, by the way, that started earlier this morning southwest of Apalachicola and have made their way all the way through the area, and it's taken several hours to do that. Now, from near Quitman, back through Thomasville, up past Spence and near Camilla, we've got this next band trying to hold together, and there's yet a third band south of Thomasville trying to work its way north. We've got some more straggling showers from Monticello down towards Shady Grove, back into parts of Leon County, and then they get a little bit more intense closer to the core of the storm from Quincy over to Chattahoochee. And these are going to be areas that over the next 2-3 hours can feel some of those heavier rains and stronger winds as the core, while it weakens, will be moving in that direction. I think this is about the area from maybe near Bluntstown up towards Chattahoochee and kind of sort of where Alabama, Florida, and Georgia all cross. That's where the core of the storm should be more likely going. And that means some areas 50 miles east of that could get some of those hurricane force wind gusts. So places in Gadsden County, sure, we could see some of that. And yes, that will accelerate or aggravate some potential damage, especially to trees and limbs and power lines. And that is going to be one of our biggest inland issues with Michael, will be some of that debris and some of that destruction from some of those stronger winds. But it's really going to be, I think, as we take a look at the surge for coastal areas for the next several days, that's going to be a real big headache. There's the center of the storm again, between Panama City and Port St. Joe, right near East Bay. That's where it's making its way across land, and it is certainly going to continue doing that. It's moving fairly rapidly, 14, 15, 16 miles per hour now. The faster it goes off to the north, the better it will be to take the rain with it. And there's that path, making it up there right where that intersection of Alabama, Georgia, and Florida is. So I think that's going to be the line we're going. One more look at some of the winds out there, and you can see Panama City, winds from the north. It's on that it's on that western side of the storm, and Apalachicola winds 58 miles per hour. These are the sustained winds, and that's from the south. So there's the difference with the storm being in between, and that's the difference between west side and east side. Strongest winds on that eastern side, whereas the winds are a little bit weaker on the western side. All right, that's a lot of information to digest. I understand. The bottom line is we have several more hours of wind and rain to deal with. It's going to last until after supper time, especially in northern and eastern parts of the viewing area. Eventually, it will get all the way through. We haven't had much time to talk about what it means after Michael. So let me show you the extended forecast. I think you're really going to like it once we get past this wild Wednesday. Morning temperatures, guys, they could fall back into the 50s. Well, I don't think it's going to happen tomorrow, but maybe Friday or Saturday morning. That's going to feel like fall.
All right, thank you so much, Rob. Appreciate that. Tell you what, before Michael actually arrived on the coast of Florida, it did a lot of damage in Cuba.
Yeah, you can see how it slammed the island. You're talking about downed trees, power outages, power lines down, a lot of homes and a lot of damage seen in that area in Cuba.
That's right, and this was when the storm was, I'm sure, much weaker than it is right now. A very, very powerful storm right now. When it hit Cuba, much less powerful. So we have not really seen any kind of damage video from our area yet. But I tell you what, it's going to be really, I'm sure significant. We're going to be seeing that very, very soon.
Yeah, and just to give it some perspective, what you saw, some of the damage there in Cuba, it was weaker than it is now.
Much weaker,
you know, having unofficially, as Rob said, made landfall already in the Panama City Beach area. Sustained winds or wind gusts, he said, what, 116?
A wind gust of 116 at the FSU Panama City campus. So that is amazing right there, just there. Well, I'll tell you what, they're keeping track of all the damage and all of what's happening with the storm at the State Emergency Operations Center right now.
Our Marielle Carbone is there right now. So Marielle, I mean, this is what you would call crunch time for those officials there. They are really kind of putting their plans together, or they've already been in place, but now it's just kind of waiting to see what is going to happen before they act.
That's right, Venice. And actually, I'm at the County Emergency Operations Center. So right here is where all of our local officials are from city and county government. We have LCSO, TPD, the fire department. They're all right here. And one of the main messages that every single one of those officials have been saying over the last hour is that now is the time to just stay where you're at. It's too late to flee. You need to make sure that you're just staying in your home and taking advantage of all those preparations you already made in your home. The last I heard, we are up to a little bit more now. We have about 1,400 people in those shelters. All the vacancies are now gone at the hotels. There may be some chance for some Airbnbs, but really they're saying just stay put where you're at. Emergency management saying the best decision you can do now is just to stay where you're at and stay inside, stay off the roads, and stay safe.
We need people to stay where they're at. They need to shelter in place. They need to use their disaster supply kit and just ride out the storm where they're at. The time to prepare has already passed. That was in the past few days we've had. Now it's time to hunker down and get ready to recover.
And that was Kevin Peters with Emergency Management here. I did ask him, you know, if something does happen to your home or you are placed in danger throughout this storm, what are you supposed to do? You know, they're saying that all those emergency crews will be called off the roads once the winds get above 35 miles per hour, so they won't be able to get to you. He said at this point it's really about relying on your neighbors. And that's been something that they've really been talking about here as well, to be helping out your neighbors if they need it, just to make sure that, you know, we're all staying safe as a community. So until the storm passes, he says that will be your best bet. But for now, they are all in the Emergency Operations Center just talking about those plans for once the storm passes, how they'll start and begin those recovery efforts. First thing will have to be to get all those downed trees cut out of the road so that the emergency vehicles can actually get through and get to wherever you're at.
All right, well, thank you so much, Marielle Carbone, reporting from the County Emergency Operations Center. And I tell you what, a very, very busy county it is right now. You can hear the rain on the roof as we speak.
We sure can, and it's going to require a lot of patience from people. As Marielle mentioned, all of those crews, and we have hundreds of utilities crews from other states here to help us here in Tallahassee. But those crews, depending on how bad the storm is, they're going to suspend their operations. They're not going to go out there. So if you are experiencing a power outage, you may have to wait until the storm passes until they can go and figure it out and get your power back on.
That's right. Still a very dangerous situation for them. They got to be careful and avoid loss of life as well. So they're going to come in right after the storm. We'll be right back.